Where the hell am I?
Deep into Romania stands a castle, and around its feet you have a village stuck in the 1600s. Wooden and brick houses filled with old architecture, stone murals and inhabitants that look like they're about to contract bubonic plague. And at the head of this place is someone, the village's name.
Mother Miranda!
There's something oddly frustrating about Resident Evil Village, because beneath all of the spectacle, style, and all the praise it got at launch whilst COVID was still kicking about, there's a game that feels like it's constantly tripping over its own ideas. And I think the best place to start is with a question that the game never really answers. Why does Chris Redfield not explain anything?
Chris? What the hell?
Sorry, Ethan.
No! What? Why?
I still don't get it. We're well past the point in the Resident Evil timeline where secrecy like this feels justified. I understand that the surface level excuse is to keep Ethan away from the whole conflict now, but the way it's handled here just feels excessive. Not mysterious, not tense, just contrived. It's this kind of narrative withholding that all the films in the 1960s used carefully. In something like Night of the Living Dead, information is limited to create dread and uncertainty. But, crucially, that lack of information serves the story. In Village, it constantly feels as though the writers are stringing you along and using Chris as the proxy. Whilst Chris, from the start, could have just said that this wasn't Mia, and then Ethan could have insisted on coming with, and then Chris obviously leads him down the whole thing of how the game starts, we're not given this. What we're given instead is contrived trailer bait setup. And that's the kind of recurring issue throughout the entire game. We're given setups without payoff. Take the Lycans, for example. These creatures are introduced as intelligent, coordinated, almost tribal-like enemies. They use tools, weapons, they even ride horses. So naturally you expect that we're given like a Resident Evil 4 type of villagers where they were constantly mutating, making it more and more difficult to kill them, which then levels out since you gain more and more high-powered weapons as you go throughout the village. But this never happens. They ride horses and that's it. They're never seen again riding horses or doing anything even remotely smart apart from maybe wearing armor every once in a while. It's emblematic of the game that introduces ideas purely for flavor and then end up not having any follow through. Compare that to something like Silent Hill 2. Every mechanic reinforces the themes and the meaning throughout the entire game. Village throws ideas at the wall and then moves on before they can even see what ends up sticking. And that extends to the survivors within the village itself. They're there briefly, suspicious, they're desperate and they're paranoid, and then they're dead. There was so much potential there. Imagine if the game leaned into this paranoia. Ethan, an outsider, entering this closed-off community. There could have been distrust, conflict, maybe even branching interactions throughout the entire game, something closer to the social tension seen in films like Village of the Damned, where the horror comes as much as from the people as it does the supernatural. We could have even thrown in a bit of a satanic panic element, where the villagers of the Hag end up sowing distrust with Ethan after he kills the First Lord. Instead, they're seen as a passing thought. And that's where Village starts to feel rushed. Not incomplete, just undercooked. Like it's trying to be a different version of Resident Evil 4 without fully understanding why Resident Evil 4 is seen as timeless to people. Resident Evil 4 had a clear escalation, a rhythm, a cohesion between its set pieces. Barely, but it was there. Village, on the other hand, just feels segmented, almost like an anthology within an anthology. Now, to be fair, that's not inherently a bad thing. In fact, it's one of the game's most interesting qualities. Again, as I said in the previous video, I'd love more smaller anthology-style Resident Evil games. Give me more anthology Resident Evil games, please, Capcom. It works so well. But because it's not inherently a bad thing, it ends up stumbling over its own feet. Each section represents a different style of horror. The castle with Lady Dimitrescu is a classic gothic horror. It invokes imagery reminiscent of Nosferatu, and even later interpretations like The Witch. It's slow, atmospheric, and rooted within tradition. Donna Beneviento's section is easily a standout. It leans into psychological horror, grief, repression, trauma. It's the closest the game gets to something like The Babadook. And interestingly, it also feels like a modern indie horror game, something in the vein of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, where vulnerability replaces firepower. And then you have Moreau. Yeah, Moreau's just kind of there, you know? His section is supposed to be a creature feature, clearly inspired by films like Creature from the Black Lagoon or Jaws. But unlike those films which build tension through the anticipation and environment, Moreau's segment lacks actual impact. It's mechanically simple, narratively obsolete.
What are you doing with Mother's special child?
And it is over far too quickly. But now we have Heisenberg. Heisenberg's section is where things really start to fall apart for me. This is where the game leads into a little bit of science fiction horror, Frankenstein-esque themes of man playing with God's power. You can see the DNA of the Fly in here, or even older gothic sci-fi ideas, but instead of being unsettling, it is just exhausting. The factory is a metal maze, and I get the point. It's supposed to feel oppressive, industrial, dehumanizing, artificial. But here's the problem. Mazes don't make me scared, they're just annoying. It reminds me of the boat section from Resident Evil 7, that moment where the game abandons its pacing and becomes visually repressive. Except here it's by far worse. Everything ends up just blending together. There's no visual relief, no strong landmarks, no sense of progression, just clanking and metal. And at one point, with how many stock sound effects that were in this game, I genuinely thought they were going to use this one. And then we get to Mother Miranda, or rather, the lack of Mother Miranda. The marketing built up Lady Dimitrescu as the face of the game, and whilst it's obvious in hindsight she's just one part of a larger structure, the shift to Miranda as the true antagonist just feels underwhelming. Because she's just not that interesting. She represents cult horror, indoctrination, obsession, and resurrection. Themes that you see in films like Midsummer and Pet Sematary. But those stories work because they explore those ideas of indoctrination and grief way more intensely. Mother Miranda doesn't. She's more of a plot device than a character. Her motivations are straightforward, her presence is limited, and by the end of the game, when the writers try and elevate her, it's already too late. All the tension is gone because you've already killed all the other versions of her. She's set up as this big, bad villain, but we've already had 4 big, bad villains. I cannot overstate how underwhelming it feels to have her as the main villain. And this ties into one final missed opportunity. Choice. Remember in Resident Evil 7 where I said that the Zoe-Mia choice felt empty? So the choice that you have ends up barely mattering. It feels less like a meaningful choice. They could have easily learnt from their mistakes and given us a choice with consequences. Heisenberg offers Ethan a deal. It's framed like a meaningful decision, something that could change the course of the entire story.
You and me, Ethan. Together, we can go save Rose, and then we can use her to grind Miranda into paste.
Heisenberg offers his help and says that Mother Miranda did him dirty, and he wants you to join up with him to get Rose back. Whilst they have conflicting ideologies on how they want to do this, I feel like that choice should have been the players to decide, except you don't have that decision.
You don't want to find out what's in that hole.
I'll take my chances.
You're a few.
Imagine if you could actually choose this situation, having the different outcomes where you stroll up to Mother Miranda with both Heisenberg and Chris, Heisenberg with his metal army and Chris with his team at the BSAA. It could have made the boss fight you have with Miranda a piece of piss, where Chris could have been absolutely leathering her from the sky with his missiles. Heisenberg could be taking care of them like an army that's trying to stop you, both of them cutting a path so that Ethan Winters can get through and get right up to Miranda and a big old glowing eye crit spot. But then, when you finally get Rose back, Heisenberg turns on you. Chris is just trying to protect Ethan whilst also trying to get Rose away. And now, Ethan, as a father, is stuck in the middle of no man's land, as a war is about to break out, and Ethan is Helen of Troy. The moral ambiguity of knowing what's right versus what's easy would have been so amazing to witness. It harkens back to what games in the late 2000s and early 2010s experimented with. Games like Bioshock, where you were always a pawn in a wider story, and yet your actions were always the catalyst to the situation you're stuck in. Instead, we're given another illusion of choice, in a game that's already full of them. And that's really what Resident Evil Village comes down to. It feels like I'm flipping through channels on different horror films, each one interesting, but none of them truly resonate or blend together well. There's a version of this game that leans fully into paranoia, its characters, its choices. But we don't have that version. We got the one that feels rushed.